Good morning, Adelaide and the world. My name is Con and I am the Conversationalist. And yes, I have my latte in tow. I am very, very excited this morning. My guest is Christopher Karvountzis. Now, Christopher was born into a secretive religious cult, i.e. the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's quite timely that ABC Four Corners actually did a program the other day. So ABC, eat your heart out. Christopher, apart from his experience with the Jehovah's Witnesses, Christopher has had a professional career spanning the wine, property development, government and private industry. And a constant theme of his career has been transformation through learning, empowerment and experimentation. And Chris's work going forward is aimed to assist in educating the public on the dangers of cults and high control groups, helping them to identify tactics and techniques they use to manipulate, recruit, and retain members. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Con. And I have my Greek coffee in tow this morning.
We chatted about the Greek coffee, the memories of mud and my mother turning it upside down to fortune tell, which sadly, Mum, may you rest in peace, you didn't get any of it right. Chris, let's start off first of all with the ABC program airing the other night was quite timely. And when you and I first met a couple of months ago at that workshop, when we had the opportunity to introduce ourselves, you introduced yourself as Chris, and then mentioned that you were born into a cult. And I think certainly I and most people were, wow, okay. That's not something you hear every day. Mate, you said you were born into it. So just help me here. Do you know how your parents actually got involved?
Yeah, so I'm from a Greek background, and on both sides of the family, actually, there had been contact with Jehovah's Witnesses in Greece from many, many years ago. In fact, on my mother's side, my great-grandfather had been in contact. And on my father's side, my grandmother, I believe, had some contact, and so had my grandfather. And then when they were in Australia, I believe it was my grandmother that encouraged the family to go toward it. And on my mother's side, my grandmother was then converted in or baptized into the religion.
Oh, see, there you go. For the listeners, I had no idea that the Jehovah's Witnesses were in Greece. So they're obviously
everywhere.
They're everywhere. They're everywhere. Chris, obviously you were born into it.
Yeah.
What are your, I guess, early memories of it that you remember, that you acknowledge?
Yeah, I probably have. Look, a lot of memories because I was born into it. I guess for me, it just seemed normal, really. But what I can remember very, very early on is being taken to the various meetings during the week, and there's a large range of meetings that this particular religion has. Back then, it was actually more than there even is today. There were two weekly or midweek meetings, as well as a meeting on Sunday, which is, I guess, more analogous to a regular church service, where there'd be like a public lecture, and then some other types of study and worship. In addition to that, there's also a lot of public preaching, where you've probably seen Jehovah's Witnesses go door to door. And I was always involved in that. I've been taken out every Saturday. It's generally Saturday mornings, sometimes after school or in an evening, or even after a Sunday public meeting as well. So they were really early memories, but that was just part of my childhood routine. It was school 5 days a week. It was these meetings at least 2 nights a week, and they're quite long meetings, around 2 hours. One of these was a shorter meeting during the week, 1 hour, a study and discussion, and a longer meeting that was around 2 hours, and then the public meeting on Sunday, which was another couple of hours. And that was because a lot of my close family at that time was in the religion, and because it is so insular, your whole community, your whole life is based around that routine. And apart from going to school, everything that you get is fed through that particular lens.
I was just about to ask, your life then, as you recall it, it was school and church-related activities on the weekend.
Yeah.
Were there any extracurricular activities, i.e. were you allowed to play sport? Were you allowed to socialize outside of the church? Was there anything like that?
Look, that was severely limited, and I think people have different ranges of experience, but certainly extracurricular activities like sport were certainly not allowed. So it got to the stage that you sort of didn't even ask. And I know for me, particularly those sort of sporting pursuits, that I wasn't a sporty kid. I'm probably more into fitness and health now than I've been at any stage in my life. But I knew, because that's something I couldn't pursue, that's a route that I never even wanted to go down, because I wasn't allowed to join any sports teams, extracurricular activities. Jehovah's Witness children will generally not even attend after school activities, even if they're school organised, school camps, things like that. So no, I guess the only outside thing I did, I always had an interest in music, and I begged my parents from a very young age to take some music lessons, and I did, and that's kind of the one extracurricular activity that I had in my life. And I think music was probably one of the biggest influences, and I think my music teacher was one of the biggest influences on my life at that stage.
Do you, casting your mind back, do you able to identify, I guess, an event, a time, or a period where your awareness grew to the point where it was, hey, something's not right here. This can't be right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Con. Even as a kid, I'm a voracious reader now, but I was a voracious reader as a kid, and the religion puts out a lot of information. I can just remember particular things. The place of worship's called a Kingdom Hall, and there was a library, and you'd be involved in cleaning and whatnot. And I can remember reading, and we were cleaning as a family the Kingdom Hall, which everyone participates in. I remember finding a particular pamphlet, and it was talking about, it must have been written in the early 60s or late 50s. And it talked about humans striving to reach the moon, and in fact said humans will never reach the moon. And it was fantastic. And it's just like, well, that hasn't aged particularly well. I was a really young kid, and I showed my parents, it's just like, so this is ridiculous, like this, really? But there was things like that, and I know that we had a really great collection of the group's publications. We probably had everything going back. I think certainly my grandfather had books going back to the 1940s, 50s.
Wow.
Like a really good collection. I would read through those. I'd find things that were a little bit odd, a little bit strange. They had, not currently, but they were certainly anti-vax before it was popular to be anti-vax. The group certainly aren't today. They're on the science train with the vaccination thing today, but they were certainly very anti-vaccine, anti-aluminium. They were very much, there was a strong emphasis, particularly in the very early days, on astrology, which they've stepped right away from. These days, I can remember reading about some of I'd had some outside exposure to some of the failed predictions that the group had made in the past, and there were some interesting attempts at providing an apologist lens to some of those. I mean, there was the 1992 publication. Being a really voracious reader, I devoured it. Was 600 or 700 pages thick, right? I was a nerdy kid. I read it like numerous times. But it just talked, and I think that might have been the first time I was really consciously aware of some of those failed predictions and how they'd kind of explained it away. But if you actually look at the publications from those times, they'd pretty clearly pointed towards, hey, this is what we're predicting for X, Y, Z, and there's a particular date, 1975, and then the explanation in the 90s, and then it was quite half-hearted and laughable. And in fact, in the last couple of years, they've also provided some more video propaganda or revisionist history on their failed prophecy. So things like that, even at an early age, made me think. I can remember that also, softer way predicted the end of the world before the end of the 20th century. And I remember that was in the 80s. And I can remember even as a kid, I'd read it in the monthly publications, which then came out. And it said, it would come before the end of the millennium. So before the year 2000, this would have been like 86, 87. And I can remember at the end of the year, they released bound volumes of the periodicals, and they'd actually sneakily changed that line, and it said, will come in our time. So it's just some really, really small things, but because you're in it, you believe it. So it's your whole world, and exploring outside of that is it forbidden? It's strongly discouraged, right? You wouldn't do it, because everything outside of the group, outside of the religion, belongs to the devil, Satan. It's worldly, and within the group there's these trigger words. You hear, worldly, satanic. People that don't believe the religion or have stepped away from it, they're apostates. They put forth the view that people that have negative things to say spread lies, are mentally diseased. They use a real range of trigger words, which mean things very much inside the organization, but really is attacking the individual rather than focusing on any sort of message or objective reality or objective sense of truth.
Chris, we talk about, or you talk about, undue influence and coercive control. What tactics or what processes do you recall Jehovah's Witnesses employing to go down that road? And I guess to keep people there, but I guess to dissuade members who were thinking outside of, let's say, the party line.
So this is a really big topic. So I would say I could spend an hour just on this. But
I was going to say, mate, I know by the end of this, we could probably talk for another 2 hours, and I'm sure that we will get another installment. But let's try and keep to time.
Sure. Well, let's think about it in terms of a new recruit. So, Con walk through the door. What are you going to experience walking to Kingdom Hall for the first time? So you walk into a relatively sort of modest building. It looks halfway between sort of hall and an office block. Be very nice, neat, clean. But you're going to be swamped with people like welcoming you. They're going to sense that you're new. You're going to get overwhelmed with displays of love, affection, attention. So that's the love bombing phase. Not too similar to how a narcissistic relationship starts, really. It's the tactics are the same, right? So you get those tactics at first, and you're going to get a dopamine rush, right? Our brains are wired for reward. It feels good. So at this stage, not everyone's going to take to it and take to the message, but those who do might, listen a little bit more, start coming to some meetings, start attending, might, get assistance from the others within the group to attend, might get help with some childcare and things like that. How does it go from there? Well, it's always harder. It's always harder to achieve that rush. And as you start to believe some of the things they say, because they hold out, look at an unrealistic but a really great promise, right? Do you want to see a world without pain and suffering? So this is the standard party line.
Yeah.
Do you want to see one? Yes, you can only answer yes to that.
Yeah.
Do you want to see the end of death and old age? Yes. Do you want to live forever? Yeah, that's the whole premise, right? Who wouldn't want those things, right? But to get it just that you have to do more and more to be part of the group. But it also feels great to be part of a group, doesn't it? We all like.
Well, that's one of the human needs, isn't it? Connection and wanting to be accepted into a group. I would suggest Jehovah's Witness, and indeed any other organization typically of that, would not be different in terms that they're preying on a level of vulnerability in people who are lacking something, whether it's lacking family, whether it's lacking love, whether it's lacking connection, and they're getting this feeling of being wanted. And whether it's Jehovah's Witnesses or the Hell's Angels, I don't think there's really much difference in terms of the tactic or the subliminal messaging to get them there. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
That's a really fair assessment. It's that outsider insider thing. How do people get radicalized in anything, whether it's down to violent extremism or into a cult? It's very, very similar. But in terms of the tactics, just to go back and keep us a little bit on track, they use things like reinforcing beliefs through singing, through repetition, through really tactics that shut down your ability, like a narcissist would, to check your own reality or to question your own reality. So it's gaslighting, really. The meetings are structured in such a way, many of them, that it's question and answer, but you don't do your own research. You will only research what's in the publications from the group, and your answer will be from that paragraph. There might be a Bible verse which might be taken out of, may not be in the context that it's intended, but there'll be a Bible verse and some answers in the paragraph, and you in a study you will literally read through a paragraph, and then you'll put your hand up and give an answer that's already there, already pre-programmed. So it's really blinkers you to anything outside. And in terms of wanting to do any outside research, why would you do that? To question what is being said from these publications is tantamount to questioning the authority of God, to question the leadership. The executive leadership referred to as the governing body. They are a group of 8 or 9 men, it is, in the USA. They are said to be anointed with God's Holy Spirit, so anointed, chosen, to question anything that's written in the books, the publications, would be questioning them, de facto questioning God. Why would you do it?
Sacrilege.
Are you smarter than God? You're displaying a prideful attitude. Do you think you want to running ahead of this organization? Do you think you're better than this? And then there's other tactics, like suggesting that you might have it's a problem with you. It's a lack of faith. You don't have enough faith to change this or to counter that wrong belief. It goes further. I mean, there's gaslighting behaviors, because you're really taught to deny the way you feel, the way that you're made, and that anything can be overcome through praying to God and asking for Holy Spirit, and that any problem or trial can be overcome, from mental illness to alcoholism to being gay, right?
Yeah.
They believe that everyone's inherently born with sin. Everyone has to work their way from it. which is just another way that the group keeps people always engaged in activity, in study, in prayer, in meeting. It just keeps you so busy that you don't even have time to, and then you've got work on top of that, or family obligations, right? Keeps you so busy that you don't have time, mental time and energy to actually
look outside
and then
question.
Then if you've internalized those beliefs and you're struggling with, drugs, alcoholism, if you're growing up gay or trans or anything like that, it's a problem with you. You have a lack of spirituality. You really internalize that. So it's not the world outside, it's not the group, it's not what's being asked of you. It's actually you are the problem, the blot, the stain, the sin is you. Yeah. Really, really, really dangerous. I think we could probably explore that further, but just to, I guess, wrap some of those things up, that there's some really good work by Dr. Steve Hassan, who developed the BITE model of control that cults use, and the BITE model stands for behavior, information, thought, and emotion control. His work is truly excellent. So it gives you a really good framework to categorize really all those tactics. And in fact, on his website, Free Minds, he's actually got a really good rundown of how Jehovah's Witnesses fit that BITE model of authoritarian control really, really well.
Wow.
As to groups like Scientology and various Pentecostal groups and Mormons to an extent as well.
One of the key things from the ABC Four Corners report the other night, there was a strong focus on sexual abuse and sexual assault. Were you aware of anything like that in your time there, or witness anything like that?
Certainly, I've had friends that have experienced sexual abuse and assault in the cult.
Are they still in the cult?
Some are. It's really hard.
Okay.
I've seen people struggle. There's a whole range of issues, as was brought out by that program. The group, despite what they say, do not report to the police. The Australian Royal Commission back in 2015 actually called as a witness a member of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, and you can see the transcript, you can see the video. He gives barefaced lies, he obfuscates, misrepresents the group's position. The facts are that the group, I think it's from around the 1950s till just before the time of the Royal Commission, has documented cases of around 1,000 abusers having committed about 18 or 1900 acts of child abuse, none, this is within a group that has about 80,000 members in Australia, none of which were ever reported to the police. And these are the ones that had come to the attention of local authorities within the groups or congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses. None of those had ever been reported to the police.
Wow.
Because everything is dealt with
internally,
very, very poorly, and internally and
falsely.
Look, falsely, it's certainly covered up. It's a male-dominated religion that there's not a lot you can say that's positive about the process. But needless to say, they engage in victim blaming, victim shaming for when it comes to any misdemeanor. But when it comes to child sexual abuse, I mean, it's so abhorrent the way they deal with it. We're talking about sexual abuse of minors. On the forms they use to internally report, there's a checkbox which asks if the minor was a willing participant in the sexual act.
What?
It's flooring, isn't it?
If the minor is a willing participant.
Yeah.
Wow.
You and I
Chris,
know legally, if you're under the age of, there is no consent.
There is no, no.
There is no consent.
No, absolutely not.
And we even know above that age that if there's a power imbalance, there's asymmetric power relationship or dynamic, that there's not consent. There's not necessarily consent in those situations either. Flooring.
Looking at that, moving on from that report, but just last thing, I got the impression that the interviews, the discussions they had with legal firms that were pursuing these matters, they felt I got the impression there was some hope that some of these would end in a positive outcome for not only the victims, but in terms of everyone else involved. Did you get that impression as well?
Yeah, I certainly got that impression, and sort of have been slightly aware of some of the work that's going on both nationally and internationally. There's certainly some hope that there can be some recognition and some recompense for some of those horrendous things. Look, and I think, Con, both you and I know that regardless of any sort of financial payout, there's no way to make up for the damage and the loss that some of these people have experienced. Look, regardless if someone that's joined a cult and then left, there's a level of trauma and loss and grief there anyway. But I cannot even begin to understand the pain, the suffering that people must go through if there's child sexual abuse or abuse of any sort involved. It's abhorrent.
Yeah, and watching that report, the young lady and her mum who were being interviewed you could just see the intense pain and suffering, on their faces and in their eyes, and it's something you just can't imagine.
You can't. You saw portraits of broken people, and that's.
And they're never going to get the years back.
No.
Chris, your LinkedIn post, which went absolutely haywire the other day, where you openly acknowledged, and many people you commented that didn't know that you had been born into the cult, and certainly you're quite open, acknowledging you are a gay man.
Yeah.
When you got to the point where you were acknowledging your sexuality and telling people within the group of your sexuality, how was that dealt with? What were were there ramifications? Did they try to talk you out of it and say, no, it's just a phase you're going through, or you have sin in you, stay with us and we'll exorcise the demons? What was it?
No, that doesn't quite work like that. And look, I won't go into the gory, gritty details, but no. I was also married at the time. There was a whole range of issues and complexities around that. Look, I won't go into the grim and gory details, apart from that there was a form of congregational discipline.
Yep.
They refer to it as a judicial committee, which is the same sort of discipline and procedure that any misdemeanor from will be convened to deal with any misdemeanor from alcoholism to women wearing skirts too short to consenting single adults having sex. So that's where you get interrogated by 3 elders or leaders of the congregations.
So it's viewed as an affliction or just a little something that you can be disciplined over.
sin and affliction. If you want to practice, or these are really, it's really hard using the words that the group uses. You struggling for the language that they use. They use language that's, it's really horrible language, like practicing homosexual, or they feel it's something that can be. There's no acknowledgement that, hey, this is your sexual orientation. This is a sin that's within you. You are the sin and the sinner, and you can change. So there's no acknowledgement of sexual orientation or being trans or anything even remotely like that at all.
In the information that you sent me about your life and all that, you mentioned that you got to the point where you wanted to take your life, and you had actually planned that. Yeah. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. So it was after the time that I'd been disfellowshipped, so expelled from the group, the community. And I always thought I was going to go back, right? I was so deeply indoctrinated, even though I had all these doubts. I just felt that I was the problem. I can remember even having a discussion with someone at work. It just sort of came back to me recently. And I asked, what's the problem? Is this me? And he was a really nice, kind guy, but I can just remember just having this whole level of, okay, I can't really speak to anyone outside of the group, because that's that's not allowed. I can't go get comfort there. But your friends, family, community support network at a time when you're dealing with some pretty serious issues, they're not there to provide the support that you want. I mean, you want your family and your friends to be there when things are at their worst. And so I was still firmly, deeply indoctrinated that this was the truth. I was the problem. So it just got to the stage, it was about, must have been 5, 6, 7 months after I'd been disfellowship. And all this time I'd continued to attend the meetings, but of course no one speaks to you. You sit up the back, you leave as you go there as soon as it starts, you leave. You're treated like an absolute leper, but you're doing this because you think that this is the truth and that you're going to get back and you're going to become healed. But I didn't realize at the time I was sinking into depression. I'd go to work and I would shut the door to my office. I'd start not taking phone calls from anyone, even work people or colleagues, right? And I was at that time I was regional manager for what was the Department of State Development, and I was outposted while I was in the Riverland. I'd shut the door, wouldn't take phone calls, return emails, and I'd just go home, and it was just constantly on my mind that I was the issue, I was the problem. And it got to a Saturday, and I decided what I was going to do. So the next day, it was a really hot Riverland day, 45 degrees. I decided that I was going to go for a run, get totally dehydrated. I had the pack of Endone all lined up back at home. And that's how it's going to end. This particular day that I did go out for a run, there was someone that I worked with who I guess was quite familiar with the situation and had always been a good friend at work. And I mean, you don't have really close friendships outside of the group, but as close as it probably is, she was close enough that she knew the situation. Her a relative of hers lived across the road. She had seen me leave my house on, it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a 45-degree day. I mean, this is sweltering, right? Had seen me leave my house in my running gear, and she went back into her relative's house, got a couple of bottles of cold water, and drove around the streets until she found me and said, right, I'm going to take you back home here, have these. She goes, and long story short, she goes, I'll see you at work on Monday, son. And that was just enough to, like, she didn't know what was going on.
Sure.
She knew enough to know things weren't great. But that was kind of just enough for me to realize, to tick over in my mind, that, you know what, there is light outside of the group. Just that little
Glimmer.
bit. I mean, when I'm here literally at the lowest point that I'd been up to that point in my life, and I've had no low point since then. It's, the person that's here to help and assist is, someone I don't really know from work, not my friends, my family. She was the person that was the first inkling that I thought that there could be light or hope outside of the group.
Wow.
She saved me.
Wow.
It's actually only been in the last week or so that I've actually reconnected with her, and we had.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's literally been this week that we had the conversation.
Wow.
She's very gracious.
Very, very. Chris, are your parents and first of all, I actually have never asked you, do you have siblings?
Yes, I have one younger brother, 2.5 years younger.
Okay. And is he and your parents still involved in the church?
Yes.
Okay. I'm guessing you don't have anything to do with them?
I have limited contact. I probably see them more than they're necessarily allowed or supposed to. But
all three of them? Mum, dad, and your brother?
My brother, no.
Just your brother?
No, my brother.
Oh, no. Sorry, no, not your brother.
Just
right. Okay.
I probably see my parents a couple of times a year. Look, it's pretty stilted, and I've made it clear that there's no going back.
Sure.
For me.
For you.
But certainly I've had probably no contact from my brother within the last 10 years. I mean, I went to console him at my grandfather's funeral and got blanked a couple of years ago. So I mean,
wow. Okay.
But look, I love my family with my whole heart. I don't hold any animosity or resentment to them, or I don't think to anyone within the group. I think I've heard it described by others, and I really agree with the saying that they're victims of victims, right? Cult members, they've had the same things, the same abuse, the same indoctrination inflicted on them. And they look, this particular group, they call themselves the happiest people on earth. But I mean, you say it, you repeat it, you believe it. But
as I say, you say something and repeat it long enough, you start to believe things.
You do start to believe things. Yeah.
Is there anybody else that was in the organization that you had a friendship or a closeness with that you're aware of that has left the group as you have, and that you now have contact with them?
Yeah, there's a number that
Okay.
I have reconnected with. And I mean, I think there's always hope. People are probably in this day and age more willing to research and be skeptical. I mean, the whole idea of cults is that they try and control information flow. But look, we live in the age of mass media and the internet. I think there's a glimmer of hope that the last annual report, and there must be another one out due very soon because it's September. Their last worldwide annual report showed that their numbers had actually decreased for the first time, like overall.
Wow.
And look, you could hope that would only I hope that only continues. I mean, I don't look. I'm a firm believer in freedom of choice, freedom of belief. Like, go and believe whatever you want, but go in willingly, go in cognizant of a group or organization's beliefs, their teachings, and understand what the group is and what they teach. I mean, any group that doesn't necessarily tell you all their rules, regulations, policies, how their work's financed, funded, and what happens when you leave. Mate, ask these questions before you get in. It's not like joining the Rotary Club where you want to leave the committee at the end of the year. You know, you'll still be friends with, you know, Mary, Jean, Joe, and Bill at the end of it.
Yeah. Chris, I guess just moving on, this has been your experience within the Jehovah's Witness, obviously has been a part of your life. It doesn't define you as a human being, but it certainly has is part of it. But what it does, it leads you to a bigger picture, and you've always spoken about service and your work now, which you're working towards educating the public to identify tactics where organizations manipulate, recruit, and retain, and to be aware and be able to identify acts of, you know, undue influence or coercive control. What are some of the, I guess, what are some of the things that you talk about, some of the strategies? Can you share some of those with us?
Yeah, sure. So what I'm aiming to do is both workshop style presentations and also some more general keynote style speeches. So for workshop presentations, I really want to raise people's awareness level to the methods, the tactics they use. And I mean, it can be cults, it can be multi-level marketing, organizations, direct selling companies, and like we've seen lots of them. But my aim is to stop abuse, hurt, and control, for people to be really fully aware of what they're getting into before they get into something. The other thing I really want to be able to do is work with service providers and educate them. And I've looked, because of my work across the social services sector and also economic development, I've got really great networks across service providers, particularly in this state. Is help them work with their clients that may be vulnerable, may be in a situation that they've been manipulated in some way, whether it's, you know, a phone scam, or they might be in a position where they are open to having their vulnerability taken advantage of by a group that's seemingly innocuous. So to really raise that level of awareness within the service provision community, so we can actually stop some of these abusive cults and tactics actually taking hold and controlling people's lives. Like you spoke at the start, the theme of my work has always been transformation. The things that I value are freedom of thought, and liberty, and freedom of mind.
Sure.
I'm really open to interact and connect with anyone in a really open and respectful way. What I don't want to see is people's vulnerabilities, good nature being taken advantage of. I don't want to see lives ruined. It's a horrible impact for the individual. It's terrible for our communities as well.
And just before we wind up, your work, whilst we're talking about major organizations, you know, Jehovah's Witness, Mormons, and so on and so forth, is it fair to say that the patterns or strategies of undue influence and coercive control can also extend to smaller organizations, whether it be, you know, family controlled businesses and things like that, but also to couple relationships where, you know, and you spoke about relationships where whether it's female or male, are being controlled. Is your work extending down to that level as well?
I want to be really clear. I'm not a professional counsellor
no, it's fine.
in any way, but from the work and the study and research I've done, look, the tactics are all the same in terms, or not entirely the same, but they're very similar in terms of that narcissistic abuse. What we label narcissistic.
That's the word I was thinking of. That's the word, Chris. Narcissist.
Yeah.
Narcissist.
So, whether they're organizations, large, small, individuals controlling a partner, the tactics are very, very similar. They're seeking to control people's access to information. They're seeking to control their emotional world. They're seeking to actually have entire control of their reality. And that sort of narcissistic abuse, when would delegitimize another person's feelings, whether it's in a relationship or a family business or even a workplace. Oh no, I saying things like, oh no, I didn't say that, or you misheard, or don't be silly. You don't feel that way, like delegitimizing someone's feelings. I mean, they're part of the same suite of tactics that are used across all of those settings, Con.
All those settings, yeah. Chris, I want to firstly thank you on behalf of all the listeners and ultimate viewers for your absolute openness, vulnerability, and willingness to share your story. And the work, ladies and gentlemen, the work that Chris is undertaking here is vitally important, and Chris will be tagged in obviously all the social media. So if there's anything you want to reach out to Chris about his work and future programs, obviously we encourage you to do so. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. As we said right at the beginning, I knew that this was something that we could really talk about for absolute hours, but we won't, and we'll save a little bit for another installment. I think there's plenty more discussion to be had. On behalf of everyone, I want to thank you again for your openness and vulnerability and for sharing. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Con. I am the Conversationalist, and until next time, bye for now.